Incredible Hulk 181, the first appearance of Wolverine, is typically easy to price. Not so for this copy. It's the legendary 9.9. In this video, we'll explore a few ways of estimating fair market value for this unique collectible. Shout out to Mazzter for the inspiration. For contrast, let's examine more typical copies of 181. We look up the book in Go Collect or GPanalysis at a particular grade, let's say an 8.0, and voila, an ocean of data. 31 have sold in the last 12 months for an average of about 6,500, and a half dozen have sold in the last 90 days for $200 less. The most recent sale was 6,200. So I think 6,250 is about fair market value. And you could do a similar analysis for any other grade. Well, almost any grade. Let's take a look at what makes the 9.9 so special. Here's the CGC census numbers for 181 in high grades. For 8.5s and 9.0s, there are over 1,000 copies graded. For 9.2s, 9.4s, and 9.6s, several hundred apiece. At 9.8, the book gets noticeably tougher, 142 copies. Now let's move to the 9.9. There are, or should I say, there is a single copy, and there are 0 at a 10. In other words, the 9.9 represents the single highest graded copy of the first appearance of one of the most popular superheroes across all time. This copy is the ultimate prize for any Wolverine collector, and it's likely the single most desirable comic of any published from 1970 forward. Let's look at the history of this legend. According to Comiclink, this anomaly was slapped way back in April of 2001, essentially at the dawn of CGC. How about past sales? Comiclink sold this book back in 2011 for a then jaw-dropping price of $150,000. In fact, according to CGC, this was the first time that a book from the 1970s cracked the $100,000 barrier. That is it for sales history. One data point 12 years ago. Back to our focal question, how much would this book sell today? First, let's be honest. The best anyone can do is an educated guess. If the book went up for auction tomorrow, there's a handful of people who are putting in legitimate bids that are going to dictate the price. Most of them, if not all of them, are going to come in with a calculated approach, like what we're going to do. But all it takes is two collectors puffing out their chest and getting into a bidding war. Regardless, there's one dark thought that'll probably be in every bidder's mind that'll cap the bidding exuberance. And I'll get to that in just a bit. Okay, I'm going to show three different approaches. All of them start with a huge assumption that the 2011 price of $150,000 was an adequate representation of fair market value of a 9.9 in 2011. What we're trying to do is figure out the multiplier to apply to that number to get to the 2023 figure. The first approach is a similar situation, and in fact, there are two relatively similar situations. Back in 2011, the single highest copy of Amazing Fantasy 15, the first Spider-Man, was a 9.6, and that copy sold for $1.1 million at ComicConnect. It was the first Silver Age book to crack the $1 million barrier. By 2021, there were 3 other copies graded as a 9.6 as well, and one of them sold at Heritage Auctions for $3.6 million. The multiplier here is a 3.3. Applied to Hulk 181 9.9, we get about $500,000. Here's the other book. Back in 2013, there was a single copy of Marvel Spotlight number 5 at a 9.8. And it sold for $13,000. In 2021, there were 4 total copies that were at a 9.8. One of them sold for auction for just over $260,000. That's a multiplier of 20. Applied to our 9.9, we get $3 million. As a side note, all my serious collecting buddies thought that Spotlight number 5 was a ridiculous sale. Okay, let's move to the second approach. I'm going to call this the Hulk 181 Collective. Here, I've looked at the average price of Hulk 181 at various price points at 2011 and at 2023. The typical jump in that 12-year span was about 8-fold. Using this multiplier, we arrive at 1.2 million. By the way, I just did some ridiculous number crunching related to a fictional character and a make-believe sale. Please give this video a like and reinforce my obsession with comic book collecting and investing. For the last approach we're still sticking with Hulk 181, but this time we're looking at nearest grade, so a 9.8. The multiplier here is a 6.7, which would get us to about a million. Notice that the second and third approach are pretty close, a million to a million two, which sounds about right to me. I'm less confident about the first approach because we're moving to different books and to different superheroes, and I think there's more variability there. Oh yeah, if I were a serious bidder on the book, here's this dark thought that would come in my mind. Recall that there are over 140 copies at a 9.8. Imagine if they were all looked over carefully and pressed. Isn't it possible that a few of them could hit a 9.9? And what would that do to the value of my book? Being tied for the highest graded is a lot different than being the single highest graded. And to me, that's why I'm not going to bid much more than 1.2 million if I had the money. If you think Hulk 181 at a 9.9 is unusual, consider this. Across the entire Golden Age, from 1938 to 1955, there is a single copy of one issue that's a 10. If you want to learn more about that story, check out this video. Consider subscribing, and I hope to see you around real soon.